With that, it's Friday, October 17th, 2025, 2:03 p.m. And I call the meeting to order. First is roll call of attendance here, and I see at least two online, so make sure you're unmuting yourself whenever you call. Rob Almeida, not present. Keith Berkman. Keith, I see your picture. Can you make sure he has the right to speak? Yeah. Keith? Hello? Keith? Okay, let's see the technical problems.
See if anyone else, if we can hear anyone else.
Mark Martinez, if you
Here,
here, okay, so Keith,
although you guys lucked out because it looks like I can't turn on my video today.
Hey, man.
all right, we are really strict.
We'll have
So
to speak
the
for us,
one
Megan.
that's- the one that's from on the audio so far is Keith.
It's already over. Okay,
Can you-
hang on 1 second.
Can you check? And in the meantime, I do the rest of the roll call. So Matt Boger is not present. Mary Hartman is traveling, not present. Judith Long,
Here,
Tracy Morano,
Tracy is unable to be here today. She said she tried to let somebody know, but she's not
Okay.
heard the message from her.
Linda Miller,
Here.
Paul Boom here, Sven Weber here. So we only need to have Keith now being able to confirm that he's here. Keith, can you hear us? Hello?
But Mark can hear us?
1, 2, 3.
I can hear you.
Okay, Mark can hear us, Keith cannot, Keith. Can you put in the chat for Keith that you should check his audio?
I'm just sending him an email. I don't know that in the subject line.
Keith
Can't hear you in the room.
Oh, can hear you.
can't hear us, but he's present, so at least we have a quorum.
You hear us?
Yes,
He's coming in and out with his.
I think he just should log back out.
can you ping him a message on that?
Cannot hear the room.
Right.
Second.
That's odd.
That's odd, and I also can't send him a direct message.
Yes, this is Zoom security protocols. So I emailed Keith also.
Do I need a sign? Do we have to write it down?
That's what you would like to do.
Can you mind? What's
Crazy.
supposed to say?
Log back, log out and back in.
Anybody know ASL?
Oh, here, hang on.
Sounds like here, right?
What do you want me to say to him?
Log out and back in.
That's not gonna work.
No?
Like, that he's not gonna be able to see.
Okay, send him another message.
I just sent him when I don't know
No, I'll send him one as well, maybe with the deluge will work.
what else to do.
So the issue is that Keith can't hear,
You could hear him, which is interesting.
but he cannot hear us. He's trying to sort it out there.
I messaged him on Zoom twice.
For the camera?
No, not like that.
Do you want me to get closer? See if I can get closer?
Yes.
I can go under the table.
I can read. No, don't, you know.
Thank you, Alan, for saving me the indignity.
No, yeah.
Yes, my costume. There we go.
Can you read it?
No, he cannot read it, but it's not legible, you guys. Like a quarter.
We can't help him. It's like your basic training and you're throwing it in the barbed wire.
I'm pretty sure there's a reality TV show that we could pitch here.
What are you?
Conquer. Does someone have his number?
I don't think.
Right.
Let's do this.
So you couldn't really your right, is that it? Log it.
Close.
I'm doing a whiteboard or trying to figure it out.
That
Oh,
close.
is someone calling? Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Hey, Sven here, hi Keith. Can you either try to log in again or just join by phone? Somehow we hear you, but you can't hear us. Yeah, okay.
Perfect. Well, not perfect, but.
Yeah, I had an interesting hiccup when I tried to get on a
Can
meeting.
you go out?
I couldn't get my video and I logged in at work, so.
Shannon, can you
What are you asking?
go out of that screen now? No, okay. Let's do screen sharing. All right. Let's wait a minute. It's Friday.
the quorum, Sven?
No, I mean, I need keys for.
Yeah, so you need him.
I.
We had
it,
we didn't have it. No, we. We had it, but we lost.
I can close the meeting.
So close. That's like a Seinfeld episode. Quorum.
Okay, so the big question now is, will he able to hear us now? Hear us now? Yes, yeah.
Present.
Oh, great. All right,
Thank you, Keith.
is. So,
This is a special meeting.
It's the longest.
all right. Longest call of order, I think ever had. Okay, so we are good to go. Next on the agenda item is any public comments on topics that are not on the agenda.
You should raise their hand if they're on Zoom.
If someone is on Zoom and wants to have a public comment, please raise your hand. None in the room, then go to the next agenda item. Approve the meeting minutes. Is there more than one to approve? Because I was not in the last one.
No.
No, it's just one.
September
So, so any comments to these minutes? No, do I hear a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second,
Okay. Let's do a roll call. Keith Bergman,
aye.
Paul Böhm,
Aye.
Judy Long,
Aye.
Mark Martinez,
Yes,
Linda Miller,
I was not at the meeting, but I have listened to the recordings, so I would say, yes.
okay. And Sven Weber, I abstained because I was not in the meeting. I actually did not look at the recording, so. But minutes are here is approved. So let's go to the next agenda item, reports from subcommittees. Would be good to get kind of a very high level update on where the different subcommittees are, any critical items, any need of clarification of information needs that we need to deal with, or any questions your subcommittee then has to other subgroups where you need information potentially from other subgroups. So with that, should we start? Linda, I know you had a meeting yesterday. Want to
Yeah.
start from the Public Works subgroup?
Yes, I think we had a very good meeting yesterday. There were only two of us, so we were short one member, but that hopefully will be remedied for other meetings. I think we, work diligently to get a long list of potential sites. And I think that, one thing, we found was, that some community outreach and, was very valuable in that process, and, maybe I'll come back to that. Our next steps are really getting some granularity, really documenting more information about each of those sites. Coming up with some criteria, in terms of the public works component. Looking at needs, and I think also perhaps, there are quite a few comparables out there, and I think that's something that maybe we need to be thinking about as well, in terms of looking at other similar sites, because there are lots of public work sites, and, there's, a good 10 or 12 that are recently, have been built or are in the process of being built or have been approved. So I think that that's interesting as well. So those are our next steps.
Sorry for the interruption. Okay, you were saying.
I was saying, so I think our steps have been somewhat delayed, but now we're moving forward. The next issue will be to come up with a definitive list, much as the other groups have worked on in terms of sites, criteria, and information about each site. And I think that, again, I mentioned outreach, has been valuable here, and I think, probably there will be some outreach, in terms of discussions with, MCI Concord, and that group. So I think that, that's really a key part of, this particular, segment under discussion, and so I think that probably in November, there probably will be some opportunity to have some discussions between the groups.
So should we as chairs already reach out to the chairs
Yeah,
of
I
the
think that would
MCI?
be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to continue to have the synchronization between two of them.
Yeah.
On the, you said, is there plenty of other public works, rebuilds? Do you want to tour some of these, and do you need help for that, or?
I think it's early in our thinking. We still have to move forward, but I think there's probably, it might be parallel to just get some information there and then see, if, I'm not sure the extent to which more tours after whatever 18 buildings that we've gone to will be successful, but there might be a couple that pop out as a reasonable,
And then probably Alan could be helpful making contact.
Yeah, I think it would be, we can
Okay,
definitely
then.
help because we have an interest in try to probably identify comps, right? Similar size community kind of thing, you can help, sort of scout some of those and then maybe set up a tour. It would be of interest, I think, for me and staff. Anyway,
Any information you need from other subgroups? Or,
I don't think so. I think, we've talked a lot about, with the department. I think the department's going forward in terms of looking at our needs specifically. I think we've talked a lot about, overlap, synergies, productivity with other groups and aspects. I think at this point, it might be worthwhile to have some discussion during one of our meetings together with the municipal consolidation. Just to make sure that it's clear, which facilities, you know, if there's a sense that any of the other departments need to be more proximate to Public Works, but I think our most recent conversations have been that all of the elements of Public Works work well together and can work somewhat independently of the consolidation efforts. But I think it's always good to visit that as we go through the process.
By listening in yesterday, one property came up as one of the potential properties on the list, and that's the Ripley building. So that has an overlap also to what consolidation group might.
Maybe as a potential site, oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's important, Paul, when you do your side, as if suddenly this is really a more realistic option, that this might come available in some time future, that this group should know if they should have a serious look at this or not.
I think also the coordination, we've developed this set of criteria, just, we probably should have the same sets of criteria, I think, both qualitative and quantitative, so comparing notes on that. And, yeah, to your point on Ripley, we're collecting a lot of data, financial data, operational costs, so rather than duplicate that, we'll probably one half a step or step ahead of you on collecting data, so, yeah.
Mark, you have to hand up.
Thank you. Linda, what's the process to, I guess, make sure that the DPW, and I guess in DPW, are we also including water and sewer and the CMLP? Is that like one group? But what's the process to figure out if it's the right size? You know, do we need to make more hires? Are we short? And then sort of second question is, you know, I know that right now sewer and water and sewer and DPW are connected or together. And do you have any sort of sense as to whether, you know, they should be connected, whether, you know, you'd sort of favor them staying that way or breaking them up?
Alan, do you wanna?
Yeah, no, Mark down, Cathcart, there hasn't been a lot of discussion about breaking it up. We've sort of talked a little about, we know what we know, which is, you know, at one point, I did, share that when I was first hired, water sewer was actually renting space. Well, Municipal Light Plant was moving out of the campus on Keyes Road. They were at 135 Keyes Road. Water sewer was renting off of Grant Street by the depot. And as a new water sewer superintendent, it was very difficult, you know, coordinating with the rest of, you know, Public Works. It was a very awkward situation. That was relieved when we moved back to 135. We filled the light plant's old facilities. So that experience would inform me that the operations side is better to be proximal. But, you know, and that's where the give and take, we haven't really explored a lot of separating the water sewer from the rest of the operations. There's a lot of, you know, with the heavy equipment and materials and kind of activity in campus, they're similar to highway grounds. You know, usually, and most of water sewer, you know, there's a, when I was hired, another, just for understanding, water sewer had a kind of working superintendent, you know, almost, you had a CDL and an administrative assistant, that was it. Right now, water sewer has, you know, 5 managerial professionals. So that's in the last 30 years. So that's just kind of some background of things can evolve and change, but I think we're really not gotten to a point of figuring out if they had to be separated or not at this point.
And Al, as you look at next year's budget, you know, are you sort of comfortable with where your sort of FTEs are today? Are you short? Are you hiring? Like, what's the right number as far as giving information to Linda and her group, and you know, and projecting for the next 5 to 10 to 15 years? You know, will the number go up, go down, stay the same?
Yeah, we can provide that information, and, you know, it's not just next year, but you're right, next year, 5 years from now, 10 years they're all different. And obviously, you're aware that we need to expand our water treatment capacity. That's gonna require more operations staff. We're inheriting and taking over certain customer service activities for water and wastewater, which used to reside exclusively in municipal light plant. And we're sort of doing things, you know, for our own meter management program, so there's going to be some changes, but we're talking, you know, a couple to a handful of additional staff over the next, you know, 2 to 10 years.
It's also not just staff, it's like how many trucks.
Yeah, exactly, that's part of the operations.
It's like,
The kind of facilities are very
Yeah.
similar to the operating facilities for highway grounds.
Keith?
Thanks very much. First, thank you to the subcommittees for all of the work that you're doing. Very methodical work, a very thoughtful approach, and I appreciate that. One concern I have, though, is that and given the nature of when the land use working group is established and when the MCI Concord work is coming to a certain point, I'm wondering if, from the information I have, and Linda may know more, I don't see Mary on the call, but there are people who get to sit in on executive sessions about what the next schedule is for MCI Concord and the town's negotiations with the state. I'm not a part of that, so I can only listen to what people say in public meetings, and by connecting the dots, it sounds like we're very close to the town making a proposal to the state of what the town would like to get from MCI. And so I'm wondering if there's going to come a point where any input from the land use working group is too late. If, for example, if perhaps others would join me in being quite thrilled with the proposal that Alan Cathcart has made for expanding wastewater capacity at MCI Concord and the adjoining property, and then identifying the 300-foot radius around that facility that provides an opportunity for one or more buildings that Concord DPW could move into. If that is just one of many options that the Public Works group is looking at, is that what do we do about the fact that the town either will or won't decide to include that in its proposal to the state? And we're not being told publicly, so we don't know, but it's a dilemma. And I'm concerned, especially by the time this committee is presenting a quarterly report to the select board, we're going to seem woefully out of sync with what's going on with MCI if we're making recommendations that are not informed by the discussions that are taking place outside of our view. Thanks.
Yeah, Keith, there's a healthy amount of information exchange going on. You have 2 select board members on this committee, and so I think it's a good question, but I think there's coordination behind the scenes in terms of what the select board is thinking and approaching DCAM with, and what this group is thinking, especially on the public works end of things. I'll kind of leave it at that.
Thank you.
And I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Just the information, that was, again, with the subcommittee for Public Works. We know there was some transition and sort of kind of reformed, and so we're just starting to get into some of the more interesting conversations. I think, to Keith's point, I think it's important that all the subcommittees are identifying the universe, not necessarily weighing heavily in on one or the other, but the community that asked, and we need to be prepared for, did you think about X, Y, Z? And I think, so, Keith, don't put any weight into any of the sites at this point, because that hasn't been done. But I think the whole idea of, the Ripley School, which is simply a campus that had a size, that could potentially accommodate, but there hasn't been much more than that, other than if someone were to ask, did you explore all the options? So I think what the discussion was, that's helpful.
thank you, I could not have said it better, Tom.
What's that?
I could not have said it better. Thank you.
And I'm gonna drop the mic and leave.
Okay, should we go to the next subcommittee and, oh,
Municipal.
yeah,
Yeah, we're doing well, we're a couple steps ahead here in terms of that, we have established some criteria, we have version 7 of the evaluation matrix, which is a matrix of, I'll call it a long list of, town buildings that could be vacated and the staff within those moved, and a long list of, consolidation targets. It's still a long list now. And we are filling in, and there's qualitative criteria and quantitative. The quantitative criteria are largely economic issues, ranging from assessment values to appraisal values. So we're well along on that. We are lacking appraisal values. For example, if we move people, and right now there's about 100 to 135 staff. One of the questions which is burned into the previous is on the Kaiser Road campus, whether the engineering staff. It's clear that the water and sewer and highway and ground staff move for the operations, but it's a question which we haven't answered. We haven't really had a full discussion whether, the few engineering staff would move as part of the consolidation as opposed to the public works move. So there's a bit of a, there's a discussion there. Just in general, if those sites are vacated, they can be sold. In which case there would be, revenues to be gained from sale, so that's where the appraisal values that come into play. And if they're sold for taxable uses, whether it's housing or something else, it could be tax revenues, so we're estimating the tax revenues from the sale. Right now, we're estimating all of this based on assessed values, we have those numbers, but we know those aren't the same as appraisal values. So we're working towards that. So we have the long list, short list. The long list, of course, of consolidation targets includes Peabody, Ripley, the 2229 site, and leasing. Of course, with Peabody and Ripley, there'd be renovation. With leasing, there'd be leasing costs. We've estimated that those might be in terms of square footage per person. And with 2229, that'd be a new building. So all those are in play right now. I'm not gonna come. If you attend the municipal subcommittee meetings, you can see kind of where we're headed, where the most information is going, but everything's still in play right now. The most important thing right now is to do the economic analysis. If we are going to renovate a building like Peabody, we're trying to get good costs on that. And on the other hand, if we vacate buildings, what is the revenue generation? We want to see if those are in balance. So that is really the important part, kind of weigh the cost of renovation versus the revenue generation side. So we're getting there. We need some better information. What information would be quite useful, and I started dipping my toe into that through ChatGPT, is other examples of where towns have converted the schools into municipal buildings. And the miracle of ChatGPT, there are a lot of information. Now we have to vet all that information, but there's tangible information of I think, six to eight towns that have taken school buildings, small, medium, large, and converted those to municipal buildings, and there's square footage estimates, there's actual costs in there. So, as a first crack, we start getting that information. How useful that is, we'll see, but that's kind of really important to weigh against our own internal estimates, and which come from the consultants that work for Allen plus Russell. So we have our estimates on renovation, cost of consolidation. We have sort of benchmarking out there. Both very rough right now. And I've shown that matrix of numbers, and our FinCom representative and other representative question those numbers, and I'm the first one to say they are really ballpark numbers. So we're getting there in terms of filling in this matrix. So that economic analysis is really where we're headed right now, and the appraisal information is one set of information. And Judith, I just got your message this morning about, I guess we can get that information, but you need some more input from us.
No, I just need you to confirm the list of properties, and I
Exactly.
think hopefully we're gonna get that rolling next week.
We need Russ to QA some of the, so we pulled operational information of the existing buildings from the FY 76 munis output. I compiled that based on the spreadsheet that you sent me. We have that QA that. So we're into mid-data gathering, quality assurance of our numbers right now. Russ and his consultants presented a very interesting presentation of Peabody. So what Peabody would look like with renovation, and a very rough conceptual layout of what would go where. It's clear that a building like Peabody can house most of the staff that would be relocated. And again, we haven't pinpointed what those staff are, exact numbers. And it probably could accommodate most, if not all, the programs being senior programs, council on aging, and school programs that are at Ripley right now. So whatever the consolidation target is, it has to accommodate both staff and programs, if we're going into one consolidation target. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm still working the numbers.
You definitely have the largest positive from you in terms of different locations, trying to puzzle the best solution together.
Yeah, and it's, but ultimately we'll have some good data to work with, and so that's good. And we have in our criteria, the qualitative numbers. We have a productivity number, which is qualitative, but could be converted to quantitative if we take into account travel times, and Mary is working on that, but what productivity changes would be in terms of dollars, in terms of a real consolidation. So we're moving ahead.
Do you need anything from other subgroups, any information?
I think we've talked about some of the Kydro campus and the people there, and there's an overlapping piece. I think Ripley, I don't think we need anything. I think we just have to keep coordinating, keep our eyes on what others are doing. Thinking out loud here about what we would need. If any of the group is planning on using Peabody, we'd like to know about that. Because right now that seems like I'll call it a viable target. I modified in the, did you see the edits? I sent you the edits of the report. So it
But I
said,
know what you're talking about.
it said most viable, I just said viable.
I think it said like, yeah, that's.
And so we'll get to that in a minute. So that's all.
Okay. And I think it's one thing what I observed, we also overlap between Public Works and you is, in the end, what's the number the planning department is 141?
141.
141 Kai is,
Side road.
yeah, so in your plans is. The Public Works, that group should be aware is what you're thinking about.
But we're considering,
People.
141 not as part of Public Works. It's planning, it's a separate,
Yeah, but if you move out these people,
correct, there's the coordination.
That's right, they're being considered as separate units at this point.
So separate units, and the question is, and this gets back to the engineering question. Because right now they just go across the street, right?
That's right.
So, to maintain the coordination.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 141 because they're in public works, but they relate closely. to public
Yeah,
works.
exactly, so
They
that,
relate closely to other entities as well. So, yeah.
If it's. And just wait, so, just the summary of the meeting this week, so it's kind of fresh, there was also discussion with Public Works. The original plan was to rebuild or modify the campus to accommodate. And part of that consideration would be inclusive of the 141 facility for Public Works.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been discussed in the past and in the mix. Just to-
And even possibly expanding around that campus as well.
yeah, yeah.
You know, if we need to get the full 14 acres or not, you know, because that campus isn't 14 acres. That's why we need to focus a lot on what the actual footprint needs to be.
There is one piece of information, Mark, maybe you can help with. Theoretically, if we were to build a new office building somewhere. It could be a 2229, or it could be. At Ripley, if people, you know, take down a building, build a new building, we need to kind of get an estimate. For an office building of a certain square footage now. I need to know, you know, I don't know where to go for that information right now, I certainly would think within the business partnership, we could get some estimates, so I'd like to know, Mark, what the commercial developers would need to know from us, square footage, in order to get a really rough ballpark and building a new building. Because that's gonna be part of the overall analysis.
Maybe Scott Bates from MCI
Scott Bates,
could
yeah.
help us with some of those numbers. Mark. The other thing is you could also look at a couple of recent municipal complex builds.
Yeah.
And then simply adjust for inflation, and just get it down to
Yeah.
a cost per square foot and then.
Wherever that can come from.
Yeah.
So we need to think about that.
Agreed. Agreed. We have the same issue in police and fire.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You want to
All
talk
right.
about police and fire then?
Certainly, yeah.
Now that you dropped the name of it?
Yeah, very clever dropping the name. So the public safety subgroup, actually, we haven't met in the last few weeks simply because we had some travel. Both Sven and I were traveling, and then also one of the chiefs, I can't remember if it's police or fire, is also out of town. But we have still been thinking about different alternatives. We've really been doing the creative component, which the municipal consolidation group is kind of largely through the creative part and now is trying to price things. The public works group is in the early part of creative and we're in the middle, right? So we're all in a different stage. So we're trying to think of different options and configurations for meeting the future needs of the police department and the fire department, both in Concord Center and West Concord. So that we're looking at different options. We're playing around with footprints because the buildings have specific footprints. In particular, fire has a specific sort of two-dimensional footprint because of truck access, but then other parts of the buildings can be 2 stories, 3 stories, so on and so forth. So it has different footprint requirements, and then there are circulation requirements like backing up a truck or how you need to move a truck and so forth. So we're getting a better sense of that and then trying to evaluate amongst the sites that are available, which could accommodate the physical demands of police and fire, which can accommodate the locational demands with regard to response times. And then which sites can accommodate the capacity that we need, and does that mean that they are together on one site, separate on 2 different sites, separate conceivably on 3 sites and so forth, so we're playing around with different options. The other thing that we're doing is, we're doing some benchmarking of other municipalities to try to better understand configuration options. So for example, Lexington, Bedford on their main street has a 3-bay, sort of a 3-bay truck area, and then an accommodation office building that's 1 story to the left. And so by looking at different places, you can get different ideas about the configuration, so we're doing that. And also while we're benchmarking these buildings, we're thinking about cost, and we're trying to think about how, without engaging and paying for somebody expensive to tell us exactly what something costs at this stage. We're doing some pretty rudimentary back of the envelope. If Lexington's new station, or Maynard also, is that right? Maynard just built a new fire station, so.
Yeah.
What did they pay for what size in what year, and can we then, do an inflation adjustment and then normalize it for what size we need? That's pretty decent for now. So we'll use that. And then also we're hoping to start visiting a couple of the facilities that both the police and fire chiefs identify as being good benchmarks, but also certainly those in the peer municipalities. But I like Sven's notion of complexity. We actually have fewer variables, like if we go back to combinatorics mathematics, right? We have fewer sites and fewer demands, right? And then public works is kind of in the middle, and then you guys have the most variables in terms of sites and demands. So ours is, I don't want to say it's more straightforward, because that suggests we might be done faster. But we are sort of moving together in I think a pretty logical sequence. We do plan to meet with the chiefs again soon to start doing more of our due diligence on needs assessment, and doing some of the photographic work that we can use to communicate with residents of our community about the nature and the quality of the buildings and so forth. But that's generally where we are, and we feel like we have some good options to pursue. Any
Yeah,
questions?
I'll echo Mark's question about kind of the future in terms of expansion, especially in West Concord. I mean, is it just 2 fire stations, or do we know the size and staff? Can you project?
So
You're projecting out on that?
what we're hearing from the chiefs is the same thing that we've heard from Carrie, which is that we really don't anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years that there's a substantial increase in staff in any particular area across the board. And staff is a different thing than, say, rolling stock, right? So rolling stock might go up, but the actual staff number is not expected to be massive changes. With police and fire, I think the issue is the dispersion of the staff and the resources. So everybody at this point has heard the data point, which is really useful. That is, 1/3 of our population is north of Route 2 and 2/3 south of Route 2. And then with new development projects, so we're gonna see that might go as high as, who knows, 70-30, 25-75. But we don't have perhaps as much of a fire presence in West Concord that we might need to have. So the idea of shifting resources, and then also the police department, which is housed in Concord Center, would like to have some small component of facilities in West Concord so that they can do some of their work in that location. Nothing big, but so it's not so much increased need for capacity, but there's a location aspect that needs to be considered, and then there's condition in terms of renovation and stuff.
I think in the work, it's clear already today, if you look at the heat map, that most of the action for fire and police is on the West Concord side. And then if you compare that, if you look at the West Concord fire station, that's a very problematic, let's say that way, situation. So in how we look at that, this plays a role, is it will be even more activity in West Concord, assuming the 40Bs and MCI. So that plays a major role in how you look at where's the center in the end, at least.
But even the West Concord Center dichotomy, or the way of thinking about it, that like the heat map, most of the calls are unsurprisingly from Newburyport, and sort of coming in and around Emerson Hospital. So if the heat map has a spike there, the Walden Street campus is actually fairly well located relative to responding to calls that originated at Newburyport and then require transport to Emerson, even if it's 500 feet. So the heat map, like this division between Concord Center and West Concord is more nuanced than that, and actually the Walden Street Station is not, for some parts of West Concord, so disadvantaged in terms of response time. So it's nuanced.
Yeah, so where are you, I'm thinking of the idea, which has been floating around, of making the West Concord Fire Station like the main fire station. And downsizing, but keeping the Walden Street and maybe expanding police at Walden Street. Is that sort of a logical?
Yeah, I would say that's probably, that's one of our options, certainly seems to meet some of the requirements for shifting some of the services to West Concord. So if you think of the Walden Street campus, I was talking to someone on the tour, I think it was actually Dakota from the Bridge, and we were saying how it's like a townhouse. It's like a two family, two townhouses gathered, joined together in the middle, fire on one side, and then police on the other, and then they have a lot of circulation systems like staircases that serve both sides, so it's a really kind of inefficient design. And then the building itself is problematic because of this kind of this firewall, no pun intended, that runs in between the two buildings. So it's a weird design. So if we shifted some of the fire component to a new, larger facility in West Concord, then we could get rid of that artificial division between sort of these two townhouses, and then make the police services available much better, but still retain a fire presence. So the Walden Street Fire Station becomes a sub, albeit a large one, to a new large main fire station in West Concord. That one of the space analysis we've been trying to do is to figure out, does that configuration work if we extend backward into Westgate, right? And the preliminary analyses that we're doing, we're not, sort of professionals at siting fire stations, and we'll get that advice at some point, but that's looking promising. And then we would have a small police sub, for example, that would sit within that new fire station in West Concord. And the key advantage of that is that fire stations in particular, and not police stations to the same extent, but they have externalities that affect the neighboring properties with regard to noise and activity and so on and so forth. And in both of those sites, if we retain the Walden Street site and the West Concord site, those expectations remain baked in to not only the surrounding land uses, but also the property values and so forth. Because siting fire stations can be tricky. So certainly that's one of our leading options at this point, but we're still trying to be as creative as possible and to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity. I mean, that's the whole point, I think, of the working group, is to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity.
I kind of think of them as academic majors and minors, right now.
Yeah.
Shifting to majors and minors. Yeah.
Would you say that's a fair characterization? I'm sure Mark has.
Mark, Keith, any questions?
No, that was great.
Okay. All right. With that, let's go to work plan updates, and Judith, you wanna take a lead?
So can I just shift very quickly to data and studies and then work plan? Because I think it would be helpful to just quickly update, in part because Sven and I have an idea that we would like to put before the committee. So the first thing, which is not the new idea, is I just wanted to update folks that we will be getting some input from a local commercial real estate agent and broker on our property valuations. So the way that we're thinking about classifying the data is that we have the assessed values, and we all know that assessed values, not a bad place to start, but they lag the market typically by 2 or 3 years, so they're underestimated. And then also they're based on municipal uses as opposed to their ultimate uses. So there's problems with assessed data. Not a bad starting point, but not great. But by the same token, we don't necessarily want to run and do detailed appraisals of each of these different sites because the appraisals are expensive. I mean, just throwing a number out there, let's say we have 10 properties that we want to understand the property value, and the appraisals are $3,000. Well, we don't want to spend $30,000 on appraisals at this point. So a midpoint between those two is to try to get some reasonable estimates from people around town who are in the commercial real estate business, who understand, large parcels. And trying to think about if they were being sold for development as opposed to a single family transaction. So trying to get some information. So we're calling that like assessed value and then, high quality appraised value and then quick estimates. So this is what we're hoping to initiate the discussions finally next week. There's been a lot of scheduling issues getting that on the table. But I would hope that we would be able to come back with some of that data the following week. So the much waited for estimated property values should be coming next week. And then from that, we can make a determination at a later point if there are 2 or 3 or 4 properties we want to chase a full appraisal for, because we want to be mindful of how we're spending money.
We're gonna get building versus land or combination.
That'll be part, so building versus land, we can do with a quick estimate. There are ways you can back out what's called the land residual. So there are ways we can back that out of a quick estimate. But if we wanted something more detailed, we can get that from the full appraised value. We'll certainly assess that. So in the context of Peabody, absolutely, if you're paying somebody $3,000 for an appraisal, they will separate the two. They will also clarify the expected cost of demolition of the building. Right, so there are, other issues.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not exactly talking about land versus building, I'm talking about parcel, like Ripley, it's one parcel, but if you could divide the recreational parcel versus the building parcel has building and land. So if you sell that off, you sell it for that price, but you have a separate land piece. We've been trying to.
So if you're doing a detailed appraisal, a more expensive one, then you can specify to the appraiser that you might look at subdividing the property, for example.
Yeah.
And would parcel A, what characteristics would parcel A be, and what characteristics would parcel B be? Including, by the way, the prospective land use, right? Because in some cases it's single family that appraises differently from multifamily, which appraises differently from commercial and so forth, right? So if we were doing a more detailed appraisal, yes.
But right now, if you take the full land value, just.
For Ripley, yeah.
And just divide it by
Yeah,
square footage.
I would take Ripley and do it at single family and then sub out the cost of demolishing the building. It's quick and easy, right? So it won't be perfect, but it'll be good enough to get, I think, to your next one.
Perfect.
So that's number one. So the property data is coming. The second thing, so Sven and I have talked about this, and I think with thanks to Sven's neighbor, actually, who circulated this to us, as Linda was pointing out, like the goodwill of the community and bringing in good ideas that come from anywhere are very welcome. So Lexington, very recently, so this report's dated April 2025, did an impact analysis because they also had several large scale new developments coming their way. And so they had a consultant do an impact analysis that includes population, which of course is something we've been struggling with, is to get our population projections. And Sven and I sat down and tried to reason out our population projections. And it's just very difficult to get consistency. And Sven and I did not want to be responsible for the Sven and Judith population projections not matching everybody else's. So we think it might be time to bring in an expert that can run the population projections that would also have school enrollment projections. And interestingly, in this report, they also did police and fire. We can extend that to add wastewater treatment as well as water treatment. So we can have them run an impact analysis that looks at what happens once we add these new units. And I think that would be really helpful. So I put a call out to these guys. Sven and I agreed that we should at least find out what this would cost. I put a call out to them. I haven't heard back yet. This was only, our big idea was Wednesday. So we just got a call out to these guys. And so depending on the price, I would like to circulate this. Sven and I would like to circulate this for everybody to look at so that they could see what the nature of the information is. And then when we have a price, this might be a very effective tool for the group going forward. And also, I think it would support, in some, Sven's idea was, if I can speak for Sven, but it would actually support MCI and some of these additional projects, because the trend line that is indicating a reduction, an ongoing reduction in school enrollment which is a, sort of a trajectory that we should be concerned about. If this kind of an impact analysis really breaks down the school enrollment numbers, it would go a long way in helping our community understand that there's value in bringing more families into town. Because normally people are scared of kids because they create fiscal impacts, but I think that this kind of a report might go a long way in helping people welcome new residential units and residential intensification in town. Great, yeah, so.
Yeah.
Did I cover, so much of this was, by the way, Sven's great thinking, so
No.
only because I'm saying it out loud, I sound like, that it was my
What
great.
was the context for that study? What was the driver you talked about?
I believe they had a couple of 40Bs. So they had plus they had 40Bs plus the MBTA overlay, which is exactly what we have, and they had proposals for 1,100 new housing units. And so we're gonna be an order of magnitude higher if you take the 240Bs and add MCI. But I still think that this is some pretty basic planning 101 information that I think it would not only help our committee, but I think it would be helpful across a number of town initiatives. So I wanted to report that because I know my friend Mark listening is like, we need this population data. And Mark, I'm really hoping that this helps us get to where we need to, and then has all the emergency services stuff as well as some public works component. So that said, is there any questions about that on data and studies? Oh, and by the way, do we have an update on, I don't know if Russ is still here, right? Russ, do we have an update on the Peabody environmental and the Peabody building condition studies?
We haven't procured the environmental yet. We're trying to find a good vendor for that. And as far as existing condition studies, we haven't been tasked to do that. We did the space layout, but the existing conditions study, if we want to do that, we can call in a structural and have it evaluated. That hadn't been spoken about earlier. I don't remember that.
I know we talked about the need for one at some point, but I'm not sure that we're at that point, right? Again, being careful about spending money. So maybe doing the environmental for now is fine. And then at a later
I
point,
think, what your group is.
Yeah, I think we need that. The existing conditions, I'm exactly sure what that means. Is that sort of layouts capacity or is that actually physical?
it's aside from environmental, and Russ, please tell me if I'm wrong here, but the environmental assessment is looking at environmental conditions, asbestos, et cetera. Whereas the existing conditions is structural across all systems, roof, building materials and so forth, which would be necessary in order to get a reasonable renovation cost estimate, I would think.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
And we've heard preliminarily through the architect who looked at the spatial analysis that their quick assessment is structurally it is very sound, but we don't have a report or documentation. That's one of the interesting things with Peabody, that it's the way it was designed and constructed, it was called out as being, very concrete in a positive way. So I think as we.
But they have to be careful with what the architect is saying and.
Correct, and that's where.
Structural engineer is saying. and
Correct.
Two completely different things.
yeah, true, but there are, we just overlap.
Don't we have some of that information from the report that was done for the school?
It was 2017. And it was for school use, which is a different standard than if you would use it for, let's say, quasi-office use.
But this has a basic condition of the concrete, it has some.
Yeah, they mentioned as far as observations of spalling and all that, there's no evidence of, but again, an architect, and Russ, I don't know if you wanna weigh in on that. I'm just parroting what I heard.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a hard line between architecture and structural, because architects as they design need to understand structural infinitely to actually make spaces that are going to stand up in the final analysis. So I think architects' take on general structural issues is adequate at this point. I've walked through that school. I haven't seen any sign of structural failure. every ridge line is straight, every wall is straight, everything's square, there's no doors that don't open because of the building shifted. There's no slab cracks, it's in very good shape. But we should get it looked at after the fact, so it's just not us saying that. So I agree with a structural analysis, moving forward, and that would probably be part of ongoing design if we decide to go forward with it. It could be.
Yeah, and I think is we have to look at what is the code. For one side, I think you plan to have a preschool element in it. So there's a certain code requirement for that, and the rest is really the office kind of environment. If you're spending more than 40% of renovation costs compared to building new, you have to bring the whole thing up to code anyway. Yeah, so.
Right, and
So we have, then that's an important exercise and see, well,
I mean, drilling down a little bit, we've talked about, okay, if that's the target and we do a consolidation, can we do it in stages? Can we renovate in stages? And, you know, I don't have an answer for that yet, but I think that's feasible. I was struck that the architect was very bullish on the building architecturally. Basically saying it was designed by some really,
Thoughtful.
credentialed group of architects, and it's a very thoughtful layout. So, yeah, I do think at some point we're gonna need that condition analysis, but to Russ's point, I think that the architect's view of it is kind of adequate at this point. Probably not sufficient for a full detailed budgeting, but
yeah, I
poten-
personally, just as a member, just Sven, yeah, I would love to see. Identifying or having a third party looking at that building structurally and what permitting needs and how much money we might sink into this thing. Rather sooner than later, like you're going into thinking and
I don't
suddenly,
disagree with that,
yeah.
the limited funds that we do have. You know, yeah, I'd love to have, it. Sure, why not? We can afford. to
so
do
I
that.
think let's do that way. If your crew identifies Peabody as a likely path to go, I think that's time where we have to understand how much money we have to sink into this
Before the record, or, you know.
before the, yeah.
Well, that's okay. You know, one of the things I brought up at the last meeting, how deep into our analysis do we have to make a recommendation? Or does the recommendation put us on the path to a further detailing? If we need the hard numbers and very specifics on capacity design, you know, that's one level of detail. So I'm asking you as the co-chair, what level of.
So from
What level of detail?
how does the process, perhaps we should talk about process first and then circle back to that specific.
Yeah, and the
Sure.
short answer is it all depends on your cost data, and I'm not confident in that. The numbers we're using are accurate. I mean, even if you're talking about a quick, square, X dollars. So we need some better cost estimates that, by the way, don't require necessarily getting a full survey of the building cost, right? So we'll come back to that. Great question, important question, and it's important for our group as
Would you
well.
like Russ to try and get pricing or cost, what would the cost for that study be? Just to have that number, or is it too early for that?
Yeah, I mean, so the cost of the study.
Yeah,
Is, okay, hold that thought, because I think, let's come back, because I think that speaks to process, so. The point in the process where we are now is, we had divided the work into two phases. Phase one was to look at our charge from the select board and focus in on the opportunities around public works, public safety, and the potential for municipal consolidation. So that's our phase one work. We have done half of that work at this point, and that was largely learning curve, site visits, getting all of the committee members to understand these different buildings and all of their issues, and it's simply, that's just takes time, right? We've all been talking to each other, talking to staff, talking to experts. So that's been an essential, although, slow moving 3 months is just learning the nature of the problem and the issues. The second part of phase one. So it's kind of neatly over the year. We have 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, give or take. So in our 6 months for phase one, focused on these 3 topic areas, we've spent 3 months getting up to speed and then 3 months, I think, exploring options. And that's where we are now. We're in this moment where we're trying to think creatively about the sites that are available. Maybe there's some other sites that we hadn't thought of that aren't available because they're privately owned, but maybe there are opportunities. And then what are some configurations of our needs against those available parcels? And so each of the subgroups, I think, is doing that in their own way, at their own speed. I think you guys are ahead. We're in second, you guys are in third, but by no fault of your own. So, yeah, sorry, but just, you know, it's nice.
We all have a quick finish line to say something.
Entrance but
Big
ringers.
force in there.
They will bypass it.
I think they will.
Please do.
So we're in, I would say we're in the option and evaluation phase. I mean, I could, you know, put this into a slide deck and show it, but I think it's the options and evaluation. So it's a creative option identification and then evaluation. And in the original work plan, I provided just a template of all the different evaluation criteria that are typically used in this kind of a process. And Linda, you won't have seen them, your committee won't have, but I'll make sure that you have them available to you. And the way you evaluate the sites is by using or choosing criteria from that list that make the most sense relative to your particular subtopic. Cost will always be a factor. So cost, fiscal impact, opportunity cost that is created by having new sites that are available for disposition. For example, that's always one set of criteria. Another set of criteria, you know, to use a loose construct is to say efficiency, right? And then there's a bunch of sub things in efficiency. So for example, is travel time reduced? Is response time increased? Is collaboration improved? Is there a better outcome for residents because they can, you know, do one-stop shopping if everybody's in the same place? So those are efficiency criteria. And then there are effectiveness criteria, which might be considered to be inherently more qualitative, but this is where we talk about wellness of our staff, the ability to attract and retain high quality personnel because we have a good working environment for them, and other aspects of, you know, sort of satisfaction, you know, effective service delivery, meeting goals around sustainability, so on and so forth, right? So that longer list, and I know that the Municipal Consolidation Group has sort of cherry picked from that list what metrics they think are important, and they've constructed their own metrics kind of painstakingly, which is awesome. But every group will come up with their own evaluation criteria that respond to the particular nature of the problem. And then at the end of this next 3 months, which will either be December or January, depending on how we're moving, there will be another quarterly report where the subgroups now report back to the full working group. Here are our options. This is how we would rank them. And then for the remaining 6 months in phase 2, the entire group is working together and largely doing discussions around, you know, what recommendations would we make based on the subwork group, but then also integrating other types of land uses, including, you know, recreation, including commercial properties, including, you know, trying to network around some of the housing opportunities and how we might be able to assist with those. So that's the general nature of the work plan, and that's where we are for the next 3 months is options and evaluation. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense.
I have a question, as we get into this creative phase, and commercial properties, non-municipal properties might be considered. How are we dealing with that in terms of communication?
You mean just properties that are not currently owned by the town or by?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think judiciously, carefully, certainly in our case in public safety, when we talk about expanding the West Concord Fire Station, there's a Dunkin' Donuts on one side and there's an established auto repair former gas station on the other side that we don't consider to be likely to change, right? So in planning, we call that susceptibility to change. You know, we don't see either of them necessarily willing or wanting to go anywhere. But behind the West Concord fire station, there are yet again more privately owned parcels where the susceptibility to change is much higher. There's been some indication over the years of interest in selling those properties. A car wash is not a particularly intractable or immovable land use. So, and it's also not maybe as high value. So there is the opportunity to think about an acquisition of property in that location that I don't think would necessarily be surprising to the owners of those properties. That's very different than talking about properties that are currently owned by individuals or corporations that would be less interested in selling. So we have to be much more careful. So when we talk about properties that are owned by fellow residents, and what kind of creative option.
I think at a certain point, when you work through your options and it's becoming clear, acquisition of private property or private land is a likely option to discuss. We have to see how we can get into executive sessions to be able to discuss without running into any issues due to certain information being in the public area.
Agreed, so
Yeah.
that when does that in fact? I guess I'm saying, how do we know when we cross that line? Will it be obvious?
I think the
or
moment you start
should
talking,
we have for every meeting an executive session so that?
I think it's potentially good to have an executive session placeholder, but let us clarify this,
Yeah.
what it is, and then we can make a decision as do we need it or not. I think the moment we start talking dollar amounts behind private property, it's important that we have that, but it's a good idea to have a placeholder in case we need it.
Does that make sense to you, Paul?
Yeah.
It seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it, like, phase one, phase two again.
I see that more of a phase as more of a phase two issue. Because again, we're out of phase one, we're not making a single recommendation. You're coming back with, at first of all, recommendations are gonna be made by the whole group at the end, right? But your subgroup is gonna come back with, these are options and these are how we might rank them. And that really don't necessarily need to. see.
Mark, as a hand up.
And Mark might be super happy.
Mark,
I also think that, hopefully at the end of the process, Judith, we have a prioritization, and the reality is that if we're talking about, new buildings for DPW, fire and police, we're gonna have to spread them over, 10 or 15 years. So just because the car wash, to pick on one piece of land, isn't available today, well, in 10 years it may be. So I think that critically, once we try to figure out what the must-have, most urgent needs are, then we prioritize, then we can start maybe exploring potential, acquisitions of private property and also trades. If you could, if there were a good piece of property to offer the gas station or the car wash, maybe they can be incentivized to relocate.
That's actually a great example of the difference between phase one and phase two, Mark, I think, is that phasing, which is the, sort of the sequence of implementing or recommending the implementation of some of these changes. There would have to be some phasing recommendations simply from a cost point of view, let alone availability of parcels and so on and so forth. And that would happen in phase two.
Say more about phase two. I'm a little fuzzy about phase two.
Well, I think one of the distinctions between phase one and phase two, and by the way, we can change. This is a living document, right? So we can change this as we go, but one distinction between phase one and phase two is that in phase one, we're in subgroups. In phase two, we are back at the table with the full group. And so your municipal consolidation group comes back with option 1, 2, and 3. 1 is status quo, 2 is some combination, 3 is, we all consolidated PB. You're gonna come back and then the full group gets to have that ranking, and that, those options. And then as a group, we will take collectively all of these options and rank them as we see fit as a group, which may end up being the same as the 3 groups, but may end up being something quite different. Similarly with the recommendations, 3 options for the fire and police campuses, that comes back to the full group and we hammer that out. That's kind of the first part of phase 2. And then the second part of phase 2 is, it's a bit of a challenge. And, Keith and I have talked about this, and Keith has made a couple of good points, is that we have a very lofty name, right? The land use working group, but our scope is actually quite small relative to these 3 particular interests of the select board. And also the reality of the fact that we have a year, and the reality of the fact that we have volunteers who are not working full-time on this, and we don't really have access to a ton of consulting data or support. So we're trying to collect data, we're trying to do a bunch of things. So the idea that we have a land use working group that's somehow going to magically solve all of the land use complex in the town of Concord over the next year, I think maybe we need to do some messaging around what it is that we can reasonably accomplish. And it may be at the end of our year that we've simply come up with a really good set of thinking about the opportunities around these 3 topic areas, but that a subsequent version of the land use working group would then take that information and really start to think about the opportunities for housing now that we've taken some of those, these parcels that we won't be using for these particular 3 topic areas. Can we think about housing? Can we think about opportunities for commercial development? Can we think about opportunities for recreation? I mean, that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, there's, I was just let me bring up 2229 Main Street, because it's sort of on our radar here, but honestly, because of location, timing, everything, it probably is not gonna fit. I mean, I would doubt seriously whether the economics of building a new building there, meets any of these needs. But for me, that piece of land and its use is gonna satisfy clearly this group. Maybe it shouldn't be, maybe that it morphs to something akin to the MCI Concord. It's a separate activity, maybe there's a separate, focus group on what we did 2229. I don't want to prejudge that, because I know there are opinions on this task force, what we can do, what we can't do with it. But it's gonna be a piece of land that's likely not PUD that will own. So at some point,
I think
phase 2, or maybe there's a new.
I think there's a phase 3.
Phase 3, because that's a piece of land that, it's on our radar as project.
Yeah, no, in the end, it's in the end is what comes out, once you have phase 2 done, is what I call, what's the surplus properties after all of this, so.
What's the best use of
2229
those properties?
2229 might be, or it's, I don't know, Ellen suddenly is saying public works should be there, which he is not. Just for the records, but there's some surplus in the end where that would be phase.
I think it's a good way of looking at
Yeah.
it. What's the unspoken for
Yeah,
parcels or.
yeah, but to get an understanding what the potential value either by selling or leasing or surplus is already part of the data you're looking at. So if you're saying as we sell, let's say public works moves out of Kaiser Road, that we would sell that. It is an important element in how we look and how we place things in our decision, but specifically around the financial part. Yeah.
It's a very good point, because, on the municipal side, we may say, okay, here's our answer, but that leaves 15 properties.
Yes.
That.
And it had-
What do you do with those?
Yeah.
What's the next step? Do we sell them? Do we lease them?
Yeah.
Do we-
But having an understanding what that would bring in to do, what on your metrics, what does it bring in if we rent them out?
Right.
Or if we sell them and it's then used And though we have not only the sell income, but also the.
So we don't have to
tax
solve
revenue.
that problem.
We don't have to solve that problem, but
We
we
just
have
have
to
to-
get a
We have to-
order of magnitude what
We
that
have
could
the
be.
framework,
Yes.
so that you can take that forward, that makes sense.
Mark, you have your hand up, and then Keith.
Yeah, Paul, have you, I know that, I think the 229 Main Street, committee you were on is no longer, together, is that true, or is it morphed into something new?
No, well, this, the standing committee called the 229 Main Street Oversight Committee is still in business. They're monitoring the remediation. And I've actually asked them this morning to consider risk communication, what that site's gonna look like. Because technically, it's a lot, they're equipped to do that. But no, the advisory committee that produced the report is not, it
And-
doesn't exist anymore.
Did you guys ever meet with developers or brokers? To
We
assess?
did. We did. There was a group that Gary Kleiman and Carl Simon met with brokers and developers to get their kind of general opinions, but not to any depth. That's something I've been thinking about. Yeah, we need to do that.
Is that in the report?
Yes.
So Judith, I don't know what the timing is. I apologize if it was today or if it's rescheduled, but you know, Paul knows my position on 229 Main as it relates to business and retail and commercial. But if that's not on the list, it might be helpful to put it on the list as far as to try to get an outside view as to what people think about it. And I think that the commissioner of DCAM, or I'm probably getting his title wrong, but you know, I was at a meeting and he spoke and he said, you know, it really is, it's really what the market wants to do with MCI is going to drive MCI. Similarly, it's not what we think about 229 Main, it's what the market thinks about 229 Main. So I know Paul's position, you guys know my position on it, but I really think that it would be helpful in the future to understand if there is an economic vitality sort of feasibility, then it would be nice to know that. If there isn't, I think we should put that to bed and make it sure that we try to find it or repurpose it for something else.
I agree totally, and we just scratched the surface on that, Mark. I did, just as an aside, I talked to John Boynton about, I should talk to others, but you know, how do we go about assessing commercial interest? And, I'm actually, on that side, I'm actually putting together a bit of a prospectus on that, sort of introducing potential brokers and developers to the site. Give it a little history, just as an introductory. We haven't determined what we're gonna do with that yet. But, you know, and I think that's phase, whatever phase that is.
Well, it is on our, I will say this, Mark, I don't think it'll answer all of our questions, but it's definitely on the list of properties that will be reviewed over the next 2 weeks with our local commercial broker experts. So at least we'll get some initial signals. I don't think it'll be as thorough as what it is you would like to do and what Mark would like to see, but it'll be a start.
And there was, at the business partnership dinner, you were there, Mark, I think, they had a DCAM. I perked up when he mentioned sort of, the idea of swapping. And I think Keith, you brought that idea, you know, well, maybe we can't do everything we want at MCI, but maybe the town is willing to do it somewhere else, so we can. That was kind of, if I got it correctly, sort of an acknowledgement that there's some flexibility on DCAM's part to talk. Nothing's definite, and I don't want to go public with any opinion on that, but so there may be other parcels in town that we can talk about. Yeah,
Keith,
Thanks very much. I guess the point that I'd want to make is that the way we've organized the work thus far, it's on the functions that are being done, who's the, you know, who is the consumer or who needs particular office space or facility space. And I think that we need to have a simultaneous game. Someone should be playing the map game, where you focus on the sites, because, and just to follow up my earlier comment about MCI Concord, decisions get made about that facility or about that location, and then you're off and running. With respect to the surplus middle school property, Peabody, the decision will get made. Town meeting's expecting that a decision will get made on what its future use is. And that at some point soon, and by the way, in the second phase of this group's charge by the select board, we are to take up commercial after, I guess, we've solved where's the police, fire, public works, and administration going. Then and only then we talk about commercial housing and open space and recreation. I think we need to focus on particular sites, as well as having each of the groups meeting separately, because the decisions, it's whether it's a big chess game or it's a big game of Risk or whatever you want to do, that the sites are known, and I think we need to start fitting the pieces together in a way that makes sense, and include those uses that we are purposely not doing anything about: commercial, housing, and open space and recreation. That the charge may say, the charge from the select board, I hope at some point it can be brought back to the select board that the charge they've given us means that we're artificially doing nothing about things that we could be doing something about right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
And just,
But
you go, sir.
I don't want to recommend another committee, but
but.
We don't have six.
this is a working group. I think what I'm learning is that this is a function we can sort of do halfway, but I think we're all seeing some limitations. For example, when you say that you hear that the market will determine. Well, the market isn't going to determine, and the reason the market isn't going to determine what a use of a property is, because we've already zoned it single family housing. So someone has to decide somehow, somewhere, is that the appropriate use of that land? And because and we've said that we really don't have that capacity in our community development group, but that's really because we've established the zoning, and they're responding just to the fact that they're reviewing the single applications that come through, but they're not making policy. So how does that policy get made? And how is a working group, maybe one of our recommendations could be that we need a land use policy committee or aggregation of housing needs and needs for commercial enterprise. But it's having not putting all these pieces together is somewhat dysfunctional. And how do we think about where we take phase 1, 2, 3, 4? You keep adding a phase, but really maybe we need a bit more sophisticated thinking about land use policy and how the select board can be creating and implementing something that the community would like to see.
Before all is
So
doing. I think what we have is, it's a little bit like this old puzzle. Yeah, you're somehow starting with the system. And like one system to solve puzzle is you build the corner that the frame first, because it's easier to identify. And the moment you have the frame, you start your way in. And it's similar what we are doing. At the end, I imagine, and we already start to get a sense for it, there will be some leftover pieces and the puzzle will not be complete. And then we have to make a recommendation how this puzzle with the leftover pieces is completed going forward. At the moment, the main task is get the frame done, start filling after that as much as we can, so that the picture is getting clearer in where it goes. And still knowing that there will be leftover pieces. That's.
Yeah, I'll just say another way of saying it, what we're doing is gonna establish the leftover piece. I'll give you an example on the municipal side, again, theoretically, hypothetically. We decide Peabody is the best choice for consolidation, well then, Ripley is up for grabs for other uses, for recreation and housing, it's, would we sell it or do it? So I think there will be pieces of land that will cleanly fall into those other uses, but I think the highest priority in phase one is the municipal uses. Phase two is added to, it wasn't in the initial charge. Some of us made comments, that we need to have this, the residual piece to address housing and commercial development especially, because we're gonna have land for that. I think the way we're doing this will afford us the opportunity to get at least to those initial stages of housing and commercial development planning. Will we have the information from the developers and the brokers to solidify that? Maybe, maybe not, but to your point about sophisticated planning. Absolutely, we don't have a master plan for the entire, if we had a master plan for the entire town, all these pieces would go in there. So we're doing it kind of incrementally, but logically, and I think it, at least for these pieces, it's going to work. Remember, there's lots of other planning with housing going on, independent of this, so, and, we have representation on this working group that has lines of sight into those other pieces of planning.
So Mark has the hand up and then we should start trying to go to the next agenda.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment. I sort of view it a little bit differently. I view it as if you walk through the police and fire stations, you have an urgent need. I don't see that urgency for commercial housing or open space right now. So I think if this committee were not to be able to explain to people what the next phase looks like for the DPW, fire, and police, we really haven't done our job. So I think from a taxpayer perspective, there's no open checkbook. Everything is going to be a battle. We're going to get through another 100, 150, $200 million of spending. It's not going to be easy. And I think we better be prepared to say it's an absolute urgency that you can't avoid. And so for me, phase two is great. And I think phase two will take care of itself. And I think phase two, MCI is the perfect example of how it will take care of itself. I just think our number one priority has to be the municipal facilities that are failing right now. And I think it's lower hanging fruit and it's just easier to figure out.
Good point.
Yeah.
Anything more on this agenda item?
Two very quick points. So the first thing is that with regard to understanding housing and commercial uses, I would actually suggest that those are being imbued through the process as we gather highest and best use data from the marketplace. So when we say the market will lead, yes, the market is telling us that Kai's Road, guess what, is probably better positioned for something other than a public works facility, right? Because it's in a great location. So those are examples of ways of thinking that are actually imbuing our current work, because we're suggesting that there are municipal uses that are actually getting in the way of other market uses. So I would suggest it's there. And then I would echo Linda's excellent comment that I think there's probably a lot of consensus around town that there is not sufficient long-range land use planning. And so this is where we have a mismatch in our name that is loftier in aspiration than our scope, which I agree with Mark. That to me that's the order of the day here. So.
Well, in the glass full version of that, we're taking care of, to Mark's point, what we're really, the urgent needs in the next 5 years at least. You know, we're not looking at 30 years, but we're looking at the 5-year horizon for sure.
And the market tends to take care of itself, right, with regard to development, so, especially when the properties are in zone. They will come in.
And zoning sort of plays a.
Last thing, but
Okay,
towards the end of phase one, remember, we have 3 kind of subgroups. They're probably not all equal. I mean, they're not the same urgency. I think fire, you know, we'll have to decide that. We got.
That's phase two, like phase
Yeah.
two isn't all these other land uses, phase two is we all come together and we all determine, you know, orders, priorities, phasing, et cetera.
So I don't know if that's our decision or the select board's decision, but we're gonna have to say what's priority amongst these 3 groups of needs. Public safety, public works, and municipal consolidation.
That's,
What can wait? What has to happen
it
first?
depends on how divided we are in our opinions. Yeah.
Yeah.
we will see, come January, we will see.
Okay, let's go to the next agenda item, preparation for the first quarterly report to select board. So in our charter, we have to report quarterly to the select board. This is our first quarterly report. Judith, you send this to the different working groups, and to Keith, so it was known, I know it. Both of your working groups have reviewed it and provided input.
So I haven't actually received that input yet, but once I receive it, I will
Yeah.
adjust.
It's some minor errors. I'll send that.
I think it was in the email from Sharon.
Oh, was there an email
Yeah,
today that had it?
That we can resend it
Jeez.
to her.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sure it's in there, I've had it.
yeah, no, it wasn't that one. I just got, the public works input yesterday, so I'll make sure you.
Okay.
No worries, I mean, it's all, as long as it's all coming, all good. And then I sent to Mark, I sent that to you in your email so that you can take a look at it. I think last week or earlier this week, and then Keith, you've also got it, as well, so.
But your comments, Keith, so,
We didn't do wording, we just did ideas, but if, you know, commentary, but if you want wording, just. let
I
me
can
know.
work with the wording and then I'll just send it back out to everybody by email, but if there
but
are.
no deliberations there, please, yeah, so. In case there is a major concern. And just do an edit or comment to one of 2 of us, not to the whole group,
Oh,
yeah.
no, go for
or
Shannon.
to Shen. So, but I think it's the report as such, what I saw some discussions of your 2 groups is, it seems to be generally in the right direction with a few editorial comments here or there. Will you be able to zoom in to the select board meeting, Judith, or
It's at night or is it in the afternoon?
it's at
6 P.M.
6 p.m.
I think I should be able to see that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I will be there in person, and hopefully get you back up there.
Night time. Find a place in Ann Arbor to go on.
The question on the way you can structure the report, our discussion here about next steps was pretty rich and interesting as far as what we're. I'm just wondering if you could incorporate any of that, as next steps here, defining phase 1, just a suggestion, because I think it would be useful. I don't know, take a look at the next steps part. I haven't edited that, but our discussion today was really very helpful to me. Probably to the rest of the select board, it would be. It's up to you.
No, it's up to all of us,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to put a couple of thoughts down that we can include that you think will create a manageable discussion at select board, then absolutely. Yeah. It's a group report, so.
And then the attachments on here, for those who.
Mimi is helping me put together a map from the GIS department of all the properties, and then we have a property address list. I don't know if I'll have that before Monday. Because it needs to be to you by Wednesday. right?
I think Thursday, actually. Yeah.
So, once I get, so the list of properties is the list of properties from our spreadsheet, right? So that's
Yeah.
fairly straightforward, the town-owned properties, that list, right? And then there's a map that just shows where they are around town. That's very simple. To the extent those would be helpful. If you don't think those are helpful, we don't have to include them.
Well, it seems to be heavily focused on, so the municipal piece as opposed to public safety or. public
It's
works.
simply
They're
a
in
list,
there.
it's simply a list of
Yeah.
the town-owned parcels that we're thinking about with, and I think it also includes 2229 and MCI and a couple of school board parcels. And then, so that's in a list and then locates them on a map. Very straightforward.
That's good.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, this one we're probably use all that, so maybe it's not essential.
Okay. So should I move to the? Now that's my agenda. I think this was
I think that was the last item, wasn't it?
second to last. So, before I do the adjournment, I definitely want to recognize that, what we did in the last 3 months. There was a lot of work, not only for us all here. But also for town personnel. Specifically Shannon over there. Alex, Russ, and others, and I know as we had also requested, the planning department, Mimi is involved, so.
Megan.
Megan, and so I really want to acknowledge that and put on the records a big thank to the town staff and all the support we are getting. And want to put a little apology in there that we did that over the summer when it's normally more vacation time for people. But I think I also want to acknowledge how responsive all you were and how supportive, and that we see that you all do also see that this is for the long term, for the best for everyone, not only for the town citizens, but also for the town employees to find a good solution here across the board. So just want to put that into the records.
Sounds a bit like a farewell address.
No, it's just, we have to, I think we stretched.
No, I agree. I know you're sincere.
Very hard. It is, I think we. At a certain point, I feared we break the system. It was a lot of work.
I think for the committee members as well, because
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of meetings, a lot of site visits, and a lot of, frankly, learning about some complicated interrelated issues. It's not easy.
Well, I think, kind of throughout all the stakeholders, I think this a unified message, this is important to the town, and everybody's taking it as important, so. Yeah, the responsiveness is great.
So with that. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn, you don't need a motion to adjourn, but I move it anyway.
Yeah,
I'll
nevertheless,
second.
you second.
That's just think wrong.
So do I have to vote all or not? Yes, no, did I do the motion? You said I don't do.
You don't need a motion to adjourn, but now that we
Did it, then I have to bring it
vote on
in. We have minute, we can talk about it for the next 10 minutes.
Actually, the training tomorrow, an open meeting, will.
Yeah, I'm always a little bit off is when we have people online, if I need a motion. If we have all in the room, I understand it's not needed. Doesn't make a difference?
Not to adjourn.
As a chair, yeah, as a chair, you can just adjourn everything.
You call to order and you adjourn.
So, but nevertheless, we have a motion, so let's do a quick roll call. Keith Bergman,
Aye.
Paul Böhm.
Yes.
Judy Down,
I.
Mark Martinez,
100% yes.
Linda Miller,
Yes.
Van Weber, yes. All right, adjourn.
You found something we all agree about. Thank you.
3:51 PM. Thank you.